CE.6c, the lawmaking process. The lawmaking begins and is conducted in our legislative branch of government. Officials that are elected to serve in the state and national legislatures are the ones who make the laws. The executive branch can propose laws and carry out the law, but it is the legislative branch that physically makes the law. Remember from checks and balances, we talked about how the judicial branch has the final say over a law because they can rule it to be unconstitutional, because the Supreme Court is the highest law in the land. We have a bicameral legislative branch again. We talked about this repeatedly. We have two houses, two chambers. The upper house made up of the Senate, the lower house made up of the House of Representatives. 100 members, 2 per state, 435 members. Every state gets at least 1 rep based off of population. So again, bicameral means 2 parts, 2 houses. And again, we have the Senate and the House of Reps. In the state of Virginia, our General Assembly is bicameral. We have the House of Delegates and the State Senate. Again, there you go. The General Assembly is basically the equivalent of the United States Congress, but only for the state of Virginia. It meets in fixed periods of time. It's a part-time legislature, and it meets in Richmond. So let's talk about the powers of the legislative branch. Well, there are 2 types of powers. There are expressed and implied powers, and you need to know the difference between the 2. Express powers are powers specifically stated in the Constitution, meaning they are listed in the Constitution verbatim. For example, the legislative branch has the power, as you learned in checks and balances, to impeach. That is in the Constitution. The legislative branch is also given what we call the power of the purse. They are the ones that confirm and approve or reject the executive branch's annual budget. The legislative branch also had the power in the original set out goals of the Constitution to set up our federal court system. And then, of course, we have implied powers. You might predict that implied powers are not specifically stated in the Constitution. Instead, implied powers are powers not in the Constitution, but they are used and interpreted to carry out express powers. Again, they are not physically listed in the Constitution. And this is because of something we call the elastic clause. The elastic clause helps the legislative branch carry out its laws and change with times. Again, remember that there are 2 interpretations of the Constitution. Those who read it strictly, who would not be in support of what we call the elastic clause, and those who read it loosely, who believe the Constitution changes with times. So, what is the process for lawmaking branches? First step, the bill needs to be introduced in the House or the Senate by a member, a senator, or a member of the House of Representatives. Step 2, then that bill goes to committee. And in select committees, a majority of group must approve the bill for the bill to move out to step 3. Debate on the floor, meaning in the open House or the open Senate chamber, where all members have a chance to address issues on the bill. Again, not just the committee members. Step 4, the bill is voted on in both bodies of government. It has to be approved by both the House and the Senate. When we talk about what happened a few weeks ago, the government shutdown, the 2 bodies would not agree with one another. And that is largely because the Republicans control the House of Representatives. The Democrats control the Senate. So again, to get something to pass through both sides and get a majority, it's going to have to appease both sides. Unfortunately, the proposed budgets that were coming out of both bodies were not meeting agreement between the other body. Finally, the last step, step number 5, is that the bill is signed by the President into law. Of course, the President does not have to sign the bill. He could choose to veto or strike down the bill before it becomes a law. So, our elected officials make laws to respond and take action when there are problems. Hurricane Sandy, for example, wrecked lots of the eastern shore, including much of New Jersey and parts of New York. Congress responded by passing immediately Hurricane Sandy relief. Individuals and interest groups help shape legislation. When we talked about the political process, I talked about the role of special interest groups and PACs. They donate lots of money to candidates and causes, therefore they have a commitment and involvement in the legislative process. So the final summary, again, there are 5 steps to a bill becoming a law. Step 1, introduction. Step 2, committee. Step 3, debate. Step 4, voting on both houses. And Step 5, signed by the President or ultimately rejected in a veto. Again, the formal powers of Congress are limited by the Constitution. Of course, if you are one of those who believe in loosely interpreted the Constitution and the power of the elastic clause, then this really would not apply to you. Citizens learn how to get involved by completing and simulating what we call a mock Congress. And you all should be beginning the process of having a mock Congress and writing your own bills, working in committee, having a debate, and voting on the bill. Okay? So how much do you remember? 2-body, 2 houses. What do we call that again? Bicameral. The Constitution specifically identifies the powers granted to Congress. When it's specific in the Constitution and written, they are express powers. And there we go. I hope you learned a lot today.